The Simulated Universe Challenge. Can all worlds be cleared using a single level 40 Trailblazer locked to Equilibrium 1? Today we find out. Only 3 worlds remain incomplete: 7, 8, and 9. 3 worlds with perhaps some of the most troublesome bosses. World 7 has abundant Ebondir. World 8 has everyone's favorite 50-50 pity loss, Yanqing. World 9 has... Seriously? Does that make this impossible? After all, we've learned that Something Unto Death is apparently unbeatable with a single character. We'll cross that cold, icy bridge of death when we get to it. For there's one key difference with Something Unto Death this time around. For now, let's gear up to hunt a deer in World 7. Though enemies are a much higher level than blazer-dono, the regular enemies don't pose much of a threat. Things sometimes get dicey with the elites, but even then, Mem's punches and the book slam are enough to keep them at bay, while shields granted through preservation blessings keep blazer-dono alive. No matter which Trailblazer I use, preservation remains the most consistent path choice for blessings. Gathering as many of those as I can is the main goal. If I happen to find destruction blessings that have grit, those are nice to have as well. Plus, any that revive a character the first time they fall. Second chances are nice to have. Error code curios are vital as well. In particular, odd code, which heals a character for 30% of their max HP each time they use their ultimate. The jump in strength from my last time in Simulated Universe is kind of baffling. I couldn't make it past the second elite enemy in World 6. Yet, here I am now, tearing through World 7s without breaking a sweat. blazer-dono's level hasn't changed at all between then and now. New equipment in Trailblazer paths truly change everything. Alright, that's room 13. And that's a much stronger deer than the one I took down in the Lv.40. Mem, let's bag us a deer.
Let's try it this other way. Trust me. We can do anything!
And that's what happens when I make the mistake of letting these titans get through my shield at a critical moment. At times, it feels like the deer doesn't even get a turn. The combo of using ultimate into book slam into Mem advancing blazer-dono's turn, I mean, look at this nonsense. But when the deer does get a turn, it usually hurts. A lot. Outrage. Yikes. Too bad for the deer, this blessing came in clutch and removed it on the very next attack, because said attack triggered a different blessing that granted a shield. Crisis averted. Mem with the magic pixel health also came in clutch. She died. Man, it was her turn next. Is this bad? It seems really bad. But the deer is frozen, so I guess we both lose a turn. World 7 complete. You wanna know the actual most clutch thing that made this a cinch? The Hunt blessing, Starlit Hunt. When an enemy is defeated by a character, said character instantly gains 60% max energy for their ultimate. The deer spawns a lot of weak enemies for Miss Murder Furball to devour, which in turn lets her slam them repeatedly with her giant paw. How is this thing not a 3-star blessing? It's insane! I didn't even have it enhanced, which makes it even more absurd. Needless to say, this blessing is amazing for any boss that summons a lot of weak minions. On to World 8. I don't think Remembrance Trailblazer is gonna work against Yanqing. Dude is dicing me up with those constant sword attacks, and his extra ice res is hurting Murder Furball's damage output. Even though I have Starlit Hunt and this is another boss it's great for, I don't get the chance to use it before getting sliced and diced. Let's give Preservation a try.
I'm just warming up.
Not a scratch.
Out of moves. You're all in on it.
That may not seem much better, but I assure you, it will be with some adjustments. My current Preservation blessing count is lacking. I also don't have any that grant Quake, which is what I used back in episode 8 to defeat Kafka in World 5. Quake deals damage to enemies whenever they attack blazer-dono, based on the current value of his shield. It can also crit. Quake crit damage is what I spent Relic Recon on back in version 3.7. I built it on the set Guard of Wuthering Snow, a set I normally would never be able to obtain at 5-star rarity, and easily the best relic set for solo Preservation Trailblazer. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out exactly how I planned. Many pieces lacked crit rate. The gloves, body, and boots all lacked HP percent, an important stat because most shields granted by blessings are based on max HP. The boots in particular turned out terribly. As for the planner ornaments, I went with Arcadia of Woven Dreams. I honestly don't think there will ever be a better planner ornament set for blazer-dono. It was built for him, as it boosts damage when less allies are in the party. This grants him a universal 36% damage boost. I plan to pick up an offensive base set of it whenever Relic Recon rolls around again. Okay, so somehow I ended up in the exact same situation, a whole run without getting a single Quake-related Preservation blessing. Still, I have 4 more total Preservation blessings than before. My defense is where it needs to be. As for offense, even though I don't have Quake, I do have a guaranteed crit resonance ability that scales damage in the same way. Well, minus the crit damage part. Quake crits scale with the targeted character's crit damage. However, this resonance ability does not factor in a character's crit damage. Bummer my Quake relic set doesn't get to shine in its intended purpose. Still, altogether, it allows blazer-dono to become invincible while slowly chipping away at the enemy's health. There is one caveat with this strategy. After a certain number of turns, enemies in Simulated Universe go berserk. For berserk enemies, every single additional turn grants them a stacking 40% damage boost. It gets out of hand very quickly, but isn't an issue here since blazer-dono's damage output is enough that the berserk effect doesn't come into play until the boss is nearly defeated.
My blade levels armies.
Not a scratch. I'm on guard.
I failed.
Blazer-dono didn't lose a single hit point the whole fight. What a stark contrast from the previous attempt. At last, we've reached World 9. When I first saw this little icon for the boss, I had a hearty chuckle. It was one of those really moments where the palm immediately goes to one's face. But it dawned on me quickly, there's a difference with this version of the boss. A monumental, absolutely critical key difference. In the previous episode, I showed this Trailblazer only boss difficulty tier list. At the top, in its own tier, is our current foe, Something Unto Death, listed as requiring 2 characters. To the right of that, in large font, are the words, based on story encounters only. That is the key difference. This version in Simulated Universe isn't a story boss. There are 2 types to each boss in Star Rail, the story version and the non-story version. Story versions have different mechanics or setups. For example, Aquila the Sky Titan normally has 3 phases. The story version of Aquila is instead 2 separate fights. Battle 1 is phases 1 and 2. Battle 2 is phase 3. This makes the story version of Aquila easier, because the player leaves combat after phase 2 and can fully heal their team before tackling phase 3. Story bosses also have scripted events. These events can be dialogue, small cutscenes, or attacks that cannot be bypassed. In fact, the game has safeguards in place to prevent skipping. We've seen this in the series. Remember when my plan was to one-hit the first phase of Phantilia with Destruction Trailblazer? Turns out, her story version has scripted dialogue that must play before her health can drop below 30%. Or more recently, the Chrysos hairs yapping during the Iron Tomb finale. While they yap, Iron Tomb gets a 90% damage reduction buff. In other words, Elio is giving players the middle finger and telling them to stop fighting his script. For the boss in question, Something Unto Death, its health cannot fall below 1% in the first phase when battling the story version. Upon reaching 1%, it immediately uses its one-hit attack that puts a character into a special death state, and ends the battle to play a cutscene. After the cutscene finishes, any character that was hit by the attack starts the next battle in the special death state. With only one character in the party, the battle always ends in defeat the moment it begins. The story version of Something Unto Death is impossible with a single character. I cheated the fight with a level 1 Sample Koski, no light cone, as a second character, by taking advantage of a safeguard that's supposed to protect players from instantly losing as the second battle begins. A safeguard that revives any fallen characters who were not hit with the boss's scripted attack at the end of phase 1. This meant Sampo revived as phase 2 began. He could then free blazer-dono before kicking the bucket, letting blazer-dono continue the battle solo. That about sums up story bosses. A bit of a lengthy lesson, but don't worry, the non-story boss explanation is just 2 lines. None of that applies to non-story bosses. Whatever happens, happens. Non-story Something Unto Death within Simulated Universe does not have a guaranteed hit for its one-shot attack. As long as I can prevent it from using that attack, I can win with a single character. And when one wants things not to happen in a turn-based RPG, there's no better option than the tried and true, always overpowered because it's a pain to balance, ice-based status effect, Freeze. The Path of Remembrance. This path puts Freeze in the bargain bin, letting players spam it continuously. It also gives access to Dissociation, a status effect that acts like Freeze and also deals massive damage to enemies. But most important of all, enemies that are frozen lose their turn. And guess what boss conveniently doesn't have freeze resistance? All the puzzle pieces are falling into place. My goal? Hyper invest in Remembrance blessings. For final enhancements, we're going with 2 of the 3-star blessings. Perfect Experience, Reticence, for faster and more accurate freeze attempts via that blessing. And Perfect Experience, Fuli, which will increase damage dealt by Dissociation. This is my first attempt at World 9. It seems to be going perfectly. All resonance effects for Remembrance unlocked. All 3 3-star blessings of Remembrance. For the offense consumable, we'll try first with a 35% ice damage boost. Though I don't have one of the cannons, if it turns out I need it, I can pause this run, get the materials, then re-enter. For the defense consumable, everything HP and defense related is pointless. Amazingly though, Plain Arcadia introduced a defense consumable that lowers enemy speed. Bottle Quantum Ghost will further deter that one-hit KO. Something Unto Death? It's time to put you on ice.
Let's try it this other way. We can do anything!
Let's write an ending like never before! Man,
The idea here is quite simple. Keep the boss frozen as much as possible in an attempt to reduce its turn count to 0, or the closest to that we can get. The boss has a stance change prior to launching its one-shot attack. so I do have some leeway. Especially so because said stance change also fully recharges characters' ultimates. How nice of the boss to give me another paw and book slam.
Trust me. Don't worry, I'll do it. Remember that.
I made it this far on the first try? It's looking very promising.
Let's try it this other way. Trust me. We can do anything!
As we've written.
I'm on it. Trust me. We can do anything! This is being in sync?
Where's the new one?
I'm on it. This is being in sync? Trust me. We can do anything! I'm on it.
As we've written.
This is being in sync? I'm on it. Trust me.
Thanks for the free ultimate, buddy. Now I have not one, but 2 book slams.
Together, we can do anything!
Let's ride it hunting like never before.
All simulated universe worlds cleared like this. It's crazy to me just how far this game can be pushed with a single character that remains on Equilibrium 1, which caps character and light cone level at 40, limits traces to barely any upgrades, and prevents grinding 5-star relics and planar ornaments in a normal fashion. I do believe I'll have to dabble in those other endgame modes now. In fact, you know what? Next video. How I beat Anomaly Arbitration King with a single level 40 character. Trailblazer only number 22. The hilarious part is, I bet many of you think I'm kidding. Which is good, because I am. Let's be real here. A challenge like that would be so pathetically easy that it's not worth blazer-dono's time. This is Moosashi, and Blazer.
I'll remember this.